even after all these years. I don't want you thinking that I don't get asked to dinner, 'cause I'm young to say that I sometimes do. Even though I may soon feel the touch of love, I just don't think I'll ever get over you. If I live till I was 102, I just don't think I'll ever get over you.
Song makes me sad. Hope you guys are doing well this evening, or whatever time of day it is where you're at. We are moving right along in industrial hygiene. We are ready to start Unit 7. In Unit 7, we're going to talk about the eyes. There are going to be 3 videos, at least that's what I'm shooting for, 3 videos. The first video we'll talk about anatomy and physiology, just very basically. The second video we'll talk about eye diseases and injury. Then in the third video we'll talk about some different control measures or protective measures to protect the eyes. What we see here on this introductory slide are some examples of eye injury and disorder. We have examples of eye infection and some other disorders that we'll talk about in the second unit. Now the one in the middle here, that's just weird. I include it because it's weird. I don't know why in the world someone would stick a safety pin in their eye. But I have heard there are people who get off on sticking things in their eye. You know, sticking things that aren't supposed to be in their eye, sticking those things in their eye. Again, if that's the case, we cannot help them as safety professionals. They need a different kind of help. If that's what they do for fun, we can't help them. But let's go ahead and talk about eye anatomy and physiology. The eye is part of the nervous system. It is easily injured, commonly injured, and when it's injured, it's slow to heal. Some injuries to the eye may not heal. Over 19,000 serious eye injuries occurred in 2018. Eye injuries that were work-related. Again, this is according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, or the BLS. Because it is so easily injured, it is very important for companies and a company's safety program to have measures in place to protect the eyes. Also, because there's damage that can be done to the eye that can't be repaired. We haven't come up with eye transplant yet. Medical technology is getting better, but someone loses an eye, they've lost the eye. There's not really much that can be done for it at this stage in our medical technology. Again, it's responsible for the sense of sight, communicates information to the brain. The brain turns that information into images. But the eyes also contribute to our sense of balance, our ability to maintain an upright posture, and our ability to move, or our locomotive capabilities. So the eye is the sight organ, but it's so much more than that. Without our eyes, without our sense of sight, I can't imagine what the world would be like, what life would be like without the functions performed by the eye. As I said, medical technology has come a long ways. When I was growing up in the 60s and the 70s, cataracts were a big deal. There wasn't well-developed medical procedures for dealing with cataracts. Now there's a relatively simple surgery that can correct problems related to cataracts. That's a great example of how medical technology has advanced, but it hasn't advanced to the point where we can replace an eye that has been lost. Now there are researchers working on the development of robotic eyes. And if you want to do some research on your own on the internet, you can probably find more information about it. But the last I looked, the last time I kind of caught myself up on the development of robotic eyes, it still wasn't very good. The robotic eyes really didn't effectively provide our sense of vision. It left a lot to be desired. But I think maybe in my lifetime, I'm getting old, but maybe even in my lifetime, there could be the development of that type of technology. Certainly in your lifetime, if you're in your 20s or early 30s, wouldn't surprise me at all if in your lifetime there would be the technology in place to replace a lost eye with a robotic eye, or even to perform an eye transplant. That remains to be seen, but I certainly think it's possible. I've already said this. I said it in the last statement. When the eye is injured or significantly diseased, are the medical response, the different cures that are out there are limited. That's why it is so important for workers to understand the importance of protecting their eyes. If their eyes are injured or if they're diseased because of workplace exposure, they may have a permanent loss of vision. One case that I worked with, a mechanic, he had good eyesight, no problems at all. He was working on an excavator. The excavator bucket that he was working on had ripper teeth on the bucket to rip up the hard material so that the bucket could move that material. Well, he needed to replace one of the ripper teeth. Again, left his safety glasses on the seat of his truck. To replace that tooth, he had to beat on it with a hammer. And to this day, we don't know if it was a sliver of steel from the ripper tooth itself or another piece of debris that just happened to be in that area where he was working. But something ended up in his eye and resulted in him losing 80% of his visual ability in that eye. He wasn't blinded, but he lost 80% of his vision ability in that one eye, which that alone was enough to drastically affect his life. And there wasn't any way of correcting that damage. So workers have to protect their eyes. If they are in work environments where there are dangers to the eyes, has to be protected. And more on that when we get into the other two videos. Now, here is a diagram showing the major structural components of the eye. Only the ones that are highlighted in yellow are the ones that you need to worry about. And again, you don't need to memorize these necessarily, but it's good to have a basic understanding of the eye anatomy. The pupil, right here. The cornea is that outer covering. And we're going to talk more about each of these structures as we go along. The iris, which is associated with the pupil. And then the lens. This area here is the lens. Then we have the suspensory ligament that is attached to the lens. Then we have the ciliary muscle that is attached to the suspensory ligament and changes the shape of the lens as we need to change our focus on whatever object it is we're viewing. Sometimes we're viewing something up close, the lens will change to refocus. Something far away, the lens shape will change to refocus. And that's because of the ciliary muscle that's making it possible for that lens to reshape and to refocus on objects at different distances. Light enters the eye structure through the pupil. That light then is processed, makes contact, is captured by the retina and the retinal structure, which we'll talk about in more detail. The light that's captured by the retinal structure, that's transformed into nerve impulses. Those nerve impulses then are transmitted through the second cranial nerve, or the optic nerve, to the brain, to the visual cortex in the brain. And it's in that visual cortex of the brain where light becomes images. But let's take a closer look at the cornea. The cornea is that transparent front covering of the eye. It refracts light and enables the eye to focus. It provides about 2/3 of the eye's optical power. Again, here's a better shot of how the cornea is the outside structure. It's the cornea that lies between the outside world and what's inside of our eye. The cornea is one of the most often damaged or injured parts of the eye. The shape of the cornea determines the optical power provided by the cornea. You've probably heard the term astigmatism. Astigmatism has to do with a shaping of the cornea. And that shape of the cornea affects the optical power provided by that cornea. LASIK, you've probably heard of LASIK surgery. That's a laser surgery that can reshape the cornea and improve vision. Another amazing technology in the 60s, 70s, and even the 80s. I think it was the 90s when LASIK surgery really became popular. That's when you heard more and more about LASIK, and more people were getting this laser surgery. Again, amazing technology that's improved improved lives for many people. When I was younger, I toyed with the idea of LASIK surgery. I'm wearing glasses. You usually don't see me in glasses, but I've worn glasses since I was in like 5th grade. But if I'd had LASIK surgery in my 30s, I probably wouldn't need to wear glasses today. Something I kind of regret, but it's not that big a deal. Not that big of a regret. I mentioned the term optical power. What we mean by the term optical power, the eye's ability to process light during the sight process. Optical power is affected by the cornea, but also by the lens. Again, the cornea provides about 2/3 of the eye's optical power. The lens provides approximately the other third of our ability to see, our ability to process light. The iris and pupil, again, they are part of the same structure, really. The iris is the colored part of the eye. It expands, contracts, along with the pupil. It controls the amount of light entering the eye. Again, the pupil is the black center of the iris. There are 2 muscles that control the size of the pupil and the iris. Nerves respond to different variables and cause dilation, which is a widening of the pupil, an opening of the pupil, or constriction, a closing of the pupil. Eye color, it's not just for appearance. Eye color does, the color of the eye does perform a function. The eye color is from melanin. More melanin, darker eyes. Eye color prevents light from shining through the iris. Darker colored eyes function better in brighter environments. So if you have brown eyes or one of the other darker colors of eyes, you're equipped to function better outdoors in bright environments. Lighter colored eyes don't function as well in bright environments. Again, dilation, that is the opening of the pupil. Some variables that affect dilation, opening of the pupil, allowing more light to enter, would be the light conditions in the environment. More light, the pupils will constrict. If it's a darker environment, the pupils will dilate, will open up to allow more light to enter. Adrenaline, a variety of chemical compounds, including some medications, will also affect the dilation of the pupils. The lens works with the cornea to refract light and focus light on the retina. It changes shape to refocus on objects far away and close up. Provides 1/3 of our optical power. Again, here's that ciliary muscle that I mentioned previously, and the suspensory ligament. The suspensory ligament is not labeled here, but anytime you have muscle connecting to another structure, whether it be bone or another structure like the lens, there's muscle, ligament, and then the other structure. Again, ciliary muscles and suspensory ligaments position and reshape the lens as necessary. The lens is made up of long, transparent cells arranged in concentric layers like an onion. It's lubricated by a liquid solution in the eye, the aqueous humor. And this is something I didn't know until several years ago. One of the interesting little trivial tidbits about the eye. The lens continues to grow and change throughout the lifespan. As it grows and ages, visual ability is affected. And I hope you don't get too tired of my personal stories here in these videos. As I've gotten older, my distance vision has improved. And I think we might attribute that improvement and my ability to see better objects further away. It may be due to this the ongoing growth of the lens and the changes of the lens throughout my lifespan. Now, on the flip side of that, my ability to see close up is slightly diminished. It's still not that bad for somebody my age. To take this a step further, television and the closed captioning on the television, if you have that turned on, I used to not be able to read that without my glasses or contact lenses. The last 5 or 6 years, I've noticed that I can read the closed captioning. At least I can read it well enough, see it well enough to make out what it's saying. And body's an amazing thing. The retina, the light receiving structure at the back of the eye. It transforms that light that enters through the pupil into those nerve impulses that I referred to previously. It is attached to the optic nerve. And I have arrows pointing here to the retinal structure. It's not just a small part on the inside of the eye structure. It's a fairly large surface area. The retina comprises a fairly large surface area within the eye. Again, light enters, and as it hits the retina, that light is transformed into nerve impulses. And if we go even more microscopic into the structure of the retina, we can break it down into the cones and the rods. The cones are receptors that allow us to see in color. The rods, researchers suggest the rod's primary function is to enhance our vision in lower light conditions. One disorder, and I don't believe I'm going to talk about this in the second video, so it's good that I have it come up here. One disorder or type of injury associated with the retina, it can result in a complete loss of vision, is a detached retina. A serious condition where the retina pulls away from the blood vessel structures providing oxygen and nutrients. And this is a condition that can be caused by high energy impacts. You have a worker that is involved in a high energy impact type of incident, it could affect the retina. Even if it doesn't hit them in the eye, even if they're not hit in the eye area, even if the impact is not in the eye area, they could still possibly be affected by that high energy impact. The retina could be affected by that high energy impact. The optic nerve, also called the second cranial nerve, connects the retina to the brain. It transfers that visual information. Light enters, it's transformed into visual information by the retina, then the optical nerve, or the optic nerve, carries that information to the brain. That information that enters the brain, it's processed in the visual cortex, which is found in the lower back portion of the brain. Other parts of the brain also contribute to visual processing, but it's mostly the visual cortex that has that responsibility. You've probably heard the term "seen stars." A guy, he had his bell rung on the football field, or he got hit with a basketball, or he bumped his head and he's seen stars. That can be a real thing. A blow, that's an indication that the blow to the head affected our visual processing. That seeing stars is not literally seeing stars, but that sensation is a real thing. Impacts to the head, the brain, and it doesn't have to be directly to the visual cortex. It could be impacts to other parts of the head that can then impact the visual cortex. Can result in lost vision or impaired vision. There are multiple cases where people lost their vision after a blow to the head. They weren't hit in the eye, they were hit in the head, and they lost vision as a result of that impact. Now that's different than what we were talking about previously with the detached retina. And detached retina is when there's an impact that affects blood vessels that supply nutrients to the retina. But with this head impact, we're talking more about an incident that directly impacts the brain and the brain's processing of visual information. All right, that's a very quick and a very dirty introduction to the anatomy of the eye and the functioning of different structures in the eye. In the next video, we're going to focus on work-related diseases and injuries.